Welcome to the Plant Report, a radio show that educates about the green world one plant at a time. The Plant Report is a new educational resource about plants, herbal medicine, ethnobotany, and the human-plant relationship. Listen to our podcast, read our blog, watch our videos, and learn from experts and the plants. The Plant Report is a project of Sustainable World Radio and is hosted by Jill Cloutier. Thanks for listening to the Plant Report because every plant has a story. Our plant today is wheat, and our guest is Larry Kandarian, organic farmer and ancient grains advocate. Larry has been farming for 50 years and is a passionate land steward. Larry farms on a small but mighty 130 acres in Los Osos, California, where he grows over 200 varieties, I believe, he may correct me on this, of plants, including a perennial wheat, which we'll learn more about in this episode. Larry is a former mechanical engineer who worked on the space shuttle, and now he is on a mission to grow grains in the most ecological way possible. Welcome to the Plant Report, Larry. It's really good to talk with you again.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here.
And I think the last time we met for a podcast episode, we were traipsing about in your fields, sampling ancient grains and doing an interview for my other podcast, Sustainable World Radio. And that was so fun. We were in person and now we're on the phone. So I really miss hanging out with you and all of your grains.
Yeah, so we're in 2 dimensions and we were in 4, so that's okay. We'll do it.
We're here, right? We did it. And so Larry, you grow so many plants. And how many varieties of plants do you have on your farm, would you say?
I'd say there's probably 1,000 different, not that many different genuses, but of the various species, we probably have near 1,000 different species. Yeah, a lot of grasses, which are monocots, but we also have dicots, which are the forbs, the lentils and peas and fenugreeks and stuff like that, and the beans, of course.
Amazing. And so you do grow so many different varieties of plants. And today we're going to be chatting about wheat, which is one of your favorites, I believe. And can you give our listeners the Latin name of wheat? And then we'll go from there.
Yes, it's Triticum aestivum. Aestibum.
Okay. And then is wheat a grass? I believe it's in the grass family.
Definitely. Most definitely it's in the grass family, which is called Poaceae, which is from Poa, but that encompasses the entire family. And a grain is a seed of a plant in the grass family. So that's the definition of a grain.
And so you're surrounded by grains there, and you've been growing ancient grains for many years. And before we get started kind of diving deep into the world of wheat, can you just tell our listeners just a tiny bit about why you really chose to grow these ancient grains?
Part of it was financial, because in the downturn of 2007, you couldn't hardly give away flower seeds or grass seeds or any of those things that were used for vegetable farming or backyards, because there were no houses being built at that time. So I went to something that was just like the grasses I had been growing lots of, which were the grains, and happened upon the farros, and I just dearly love the farros. So, we do Einkorn farro, Emmer Farro, and Spelt, which are all 3 different farros aging from 27,000 to 19,500 to 18,000 years old.
So when you're talking ancient grains, you're really talking ancient, like really ancient.
Yeah, certainly. Very ancient. So I say I'm an ancient guy growing old grains.
And your birthday's coming up soon, too. Happy early birthday.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And so wheat has a really fascinating and long history, and it's been very influential on human culture. Can you just share a few interesting facts about the history of this plant?
Yes, I would start with the most ancient one, which is Einkorn, and it got its name. Ein means one in German. I don't know how the Germans got involved in it, because it came from the Fertile Crescent, but they did. Corn is grains, or one grain, because it has one seed on the heads. Each individual's encapsulated part contains one seed, where other wheats have maybe two or three. But it's the reason that you and I are talking today, Jill. It emanated from the Fertile Crescent. It was gathered in the Paleolithic times, and then flash forward 12,000 years ago to Neolithic times. People started growing it between the Tigris and Euphrates because they had water, and decided, this nomadic stuff is not very good, so let's just hang out at home. And so they set up camps, which were, the first civilization coming together, and with all the good, bad, and the ugly. That one grain is responsible for us talking, because people then started communicating with each other more. Then they had the arts and music and all the beautiful things, stories around the campfires, and then they tamed the wolves to eat their scraps. The wolves became dogs. So a whole lot happened because of einkorn.
Wow. And einkorn has survived through the ages. We can actually buy a bag of this ancient, wise plant.
Yes, yeah, it's 27,000 years old, and it's a diploid, so the ploidy is different. So the number of chromosomes, the N number is 7, and it has 2, because it's a diploid, so 2 times 7 is 14 chromosomes. And, if you do a search on yourself, you find that 23andMe, and so we have 23. But when you get to just Emmer Farro, it's a tetraploid. 4 times 7 is 28. So I always say, I'm not very smart. Hell, Emmer Farro is smarter than me. It's 28. I have 23. So, yeah.
It's so great. So we have these ancient grains like einkorn, and then we have more modern industrial varieties of wheat. If you, as a farmer, how would you describe the major differences between them?
Well, the first major difference is pH. The pH of the older grains is more basic, so they have a higher pH, so they're not so prone to cause cancer. Whereas the modern grains are more, it's a lower pH, so they're more acid. And so, and they were crossed with the Chinese wheats, trying to get a way to mechanize the harvest. So Chinese wheats were shorter and little tufts, and so after the 1940s and the advent of the Haber-Bosch process for making nitrogen out of ammonia out of the air, which is still in existence today, then they were able to put nitrogen in the ground and fertilize these plants. And then they had many tillers, but they were short, so they didn't fall over like the ancient grains do, because they're big, tall guys. And so now you could mechanically harvest with machines going 5, 6, 7, 8 miles an hour. So so that's the difference.
Wow. And so it's more in the plant itself that it was chosen for its ability to be harvested more easily. That's so interesting. So one question I had for you, Larry, which we've talked about this in our other interview too, but wheat was really a revered plant, right? It was part of the staff of life, and people built civilizations around growing this plant. And I'm curious, how did wheat go from that to public enemy number one, at least in the US? Is it the G word?
Yeah, I think it is the G word, the gluten word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's that, because there's some people that have written books, and they're in the business of selling books, and I'm pardon my taking that tack, but I just really disagree with that. There's nothing at all the matter with grains, and we have molars because we were grinding those things down in our teeth. And I can tell you, if I lived in Paleolithic times and there was a seed head of something like einkorn there, I sure as hell going to eat that a lot more than I will a foxtail, because it's a lot bigger seed. And then my molars would be grinding it up. Okay, so it's just a lot of it's histrionics, I think, but a lot of it is just marketing and people trying to pose themselves as selling something, and what they're selling really is a book. But all that stuff is good for us. Anything that grows naturally, and wheat does, way back 27,000 years ago, we should be eating. We should have a much more varied diet. If you soak it in with a little bit of apple cider vinegar and get rid of the lectins and phytic acid that are on the skin, and that's on the skin of all seeds as a protection mechanism, then now you've got a palatable food to eat, and it's good for you. People with celiac disease, I understand that. Yes, that is the G word, and you have to be careful. But einkorn is missing one of the gliadins, or gliadins, however you want to say it. It's missing gamma gliadin, which is responsible for part of the villi in our intestines lying down, so that there's not enough surface area to absorb the nutrition from the food as it goes through our digestive system. And so what we get in our bloodstream is not near enough energy, and what comes out the other end is the energy. So we're not able to use it if we have celiac disease. But einkorn is, in most cases, palatable by people with celiac disease. I can't say all cases. I'm not a doctor, but everybody is different. We're all so very different.
One thing that I wanted to make clear too is that in doing this research, I really discovered that wheat actually has a lot of nutrition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, the different wheats have different glycemic indexes, and modern wheats have a higher glycemic index, which means what happens when you multiply a glycemic index times the amount of carbs that the grain itself contains, and you get your glycemic load. And if that load is high, then if you're prone to diabetes, then of course you're going to have issues with the grain. So that's the other G word, is a glycemic thing. But like Khorasan wheat and some of the ancient oats and even einkorn have fairly low glycemic indexes, and then the carbs are not that high, and so when you multiply those two, you end up with a lower number. So compared to modern wheats. Okay, so and on the table, stuff that we sell, probably Khorasan wheat, which is Camus, known as Camus, and the barleys and teff have the lowest glycemic index, which is between 28 and 36. Some grains can get up to 100.
Wow, really? So is like, because
Yeah.
I make sourdough bread a lot. I'm totally addicted to the process and love my starter. But when I buy bread flour, because I grind my own flour and I bought grain from you to do so, and it's just heavenly. But when I buy bread flour in the store, am I buying a high glycemic flour, would you say?
Yes, because it's coming from all over the world, and they're trying to make it all the same. So you're getting wheat from Afghanistan that's so high in gliadin, but they bring those into the United States and blend them with other stuff that has lower numbers. So the numbers are always a constant. So you don't know what you're getting. The mixture of everything, and some of it, and pardon me, but this is the way it is, has been sprayed with glyphosate, which is Roundup. And, I don't know that they do that in other countries, but I know that does happen in the United States. And people will show pictures on Instagram of people spraying wheat fields that are 8 inches tall and saying, see, they're spraying it with Roundup. Well, no, that's not true. If you sprayed it with Roundup and it's 8 inches tall, next week it'll be dead. Okay, so you're not going to harvest anything. They wait until the plant is fully mature, and the plant is a C3, so it grows during the cool season of the year. During the rainy season, uses that rain. Then when we get to equinox, March 21st, the days are getting equal length, and so that's when it goes into the reproductive state. Before then, it's vegetative, growing roots and a clump, and then up she comes, and now it's got all those roots to pull energy out of the soil, or the nitrogen that farmers are putting in. It bolts. That's bolting is when seed heads come up, puts up the flag leaf, then comes the seed. And then if you have weeds in there and you want to mechanically harvest, the weeds don't typically senesce because the plant will kill itself. The wheat is amazing. It promotes it puts ethylene in its own body, so it kills itself, and that's what dries up the seed heads. So then you can come in and thrash them, and then they don't shatter. So you can come in with a combine going at pretty good speed and thrash them and get the seed up in the bin. And so what happens is you can only do that if it's dry. So if you have weeds in the field and they're not drying down, guess what? You got a problem. So then they hire an airplane or helicopter and they fly glyphosate, which is Roundup, over that. And then any of the wheat that were dry are not affected because it has to absorb. It can't absorb if it's not alive. Okay, so but there are some wheat seeds that are still alive and not quite mature yet because they don't all mature the same day. So those are getting sprayed and imbibing the glyphosate or Roundup through the vascular system of the plant. And then when the weeds are dry and the combine comes through, now you've got grains in there that have glyphosate in them. Hence what you were doing from, I don't know the brands, and I'm not going to say any brands, but anybody that's doing wheat that's not organic, now you've got Roundup in it.
Oh, so I wonder if many of the health issues that people think they're experiencing with wheat is actually from glyphosate.
Many of those are distinctly from this, yes.
Hmm. That's a shame. So how, as an organic ecological farmer, do you deal with the weeds in your wheat field?
Well, we windrow, so we just cut them and lay them down in a windrow with a windrowing machine. It's just a sickle bar and some belts that put all of it together. So we cut 12 feet and put it into about 3. And so now you've got a row of stuff that's piled up. And so you can see when you see hay fields that are being cut, like in the San Joaquin Valley, or even here in the Central Coast, where they do the different oats different times of the year, and then they make those round bales. Same thing. It's just a windrow. It dries up in the windrow. The top gets the sun. The bottom gets dried from the wind blowing through it, and it doesn't blow away. And then you pick it up with a thrashing machine, because there's 2 kinds of machines. There's a combine for the direct cutting, which combines 2 operations, cutting and thrashing. That's why it's called combine. And that goes at a very fast speed, miles per hour down the field. And then the other one is a thrashing machine, which you cut the crop, lay it in a windrow, pick it up with a rubber band thing with little fingers on it that acts like a fork and picks it up, and thrash it. So that's how we deal with it. If there's weeds in the field, there's almost no weeds that are the same size as wheat. So I can separate them on my C-Clean.
Is that so? It does sound like that would be more time consuming, which I can see if farming is so industrialized, it would be a hard
Yeah.
transition for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you do monocrop and you're doing thousands of acres of wheat, the simplest thing is ring up on the phone and tell the guy, spray my field with Roundup.
Mm,
And he does it one day, and a week later they're thrashing.
wow.
End of story.
Oh, that's really a shame that glyphosate is so widely used, and that if you're not buying organic wheat, your wheat could be filled with glyphosate. Not a good thing. So let's move on to home gardeners.
Get it?
For the home gardener listening to this podcast, is it worth it to plant a patch of wheat, or is it something that you need a huge space for?
No, you don't need a very huge space, because most wheat, there's 43,560, but this is called 44,000 square feet in an acre. So, if you have a 10 by 10, now you've got 100 square feet. That's not very big. So 100 is, for 40,000 is, I don't know, 1/400th. And so if you would get 5 tons, which is 10,000 pounds, now you would get like 25 pounds out of 10 square feet. 100 square feet.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So, and that's good, but the issue is I've had people that have grown like Sonora white wheat, which is a good pastry wheat, here in the Avila Valley near me. The issue is they don't know how to thrash it. So they'll cut it, put it on a tarp, and that's equivalent to me cutting it and putting it in the windrow. And then they run over it with a bicycle. Well, bicycle has a narrow little tire. You're going to be running over a lot of it a lot of times before you get every one of those heads to break. So, we do it if we don't run it through a thrashing machine. I have a 15-foot roller that is about 3 feet in diameter and filled with water and weighs about 4,000 pounds. And we just go in circles. When you go in a circle, the inner circle is spinning where the outer circle is just touching the dirt. So, I go in one direction until I get dizzy, and then I go the other way until I get undizzy. And when I'm undizzy, it's thrashed.
You really need something with gigantic tires, and I can't I can't really think of anything I have at home.
Just a roller. You could get one of those garden rollers that they use to flatten out for your lawn, and
Oh,
fill it with
yeah.
water,
Hmm.
something like that. You pull it and turn it, twist and turn it, or just beat it with um, uh, put it in a bag and hit it against concrete or the dirt or something. There's lots of ways of doing it. I've seen people put it in a 55-gallon drum, and then they get a drill, and then on the end of it they put bicycle chain and Jesus. I mean, that's asking for murder.
Yeah.
So that's going to be killed. It's crazy. And so, people get ingenious, but some of those ingenious ways aren't OSHA approved, I guess I
Yeah.
would say. Yeah,
So you have to be very careful. So actually what I'm getting
yeah,
from this is the growing of the wheat would be fun and
easy.
easy. It's just
Yeah,
making use of it is the challenge.
yeah, yeah, yeah. How to thrash it and get it pre-thrashing. And everybody, not everybody, most people that have done it, they go, "Well, that's too much work. I'll just go buy it."
Hmm. Hmm. So support your
Yeah,
local grain farmer is the message I'm
yeah,
getting here. We
yeah,
can grow
yeah,
the kale and all the other things that are easy to harvest, but this
yeah,
would be
yeah.
maybe hard. And if someone's ambitious and adventurous, I'm sure there's tons of information online on how to,
Yeah.
yeah. So wheat is growing in your organic field, and I'm just curious, like, what does wheat need to be a happy plant, a happy crop? Is it a heavy feeder? What are its water needs and things like that?
Well, the water needs are almost insignificant because, as I said, we plant in the fall of the year. So typically, I think as Mother Nature irrigating her fields in Thanksgiving. So if you plant before Thanksgiving, at the end of November, sometimes you can plant October, September, October, in the dry, and it can stay in the dry until it rains, and then it starts to grow, and it utilizes the moisture in the soil from the rain, and of course during the rainy season our days are shorter, so that means there's not that much evapotranspiration, so you're not losing that. So it's very efficient, and so it creates a good root system. And then here we come March 21st, and now we're at spring, and up it comes going reproductive, and then it uses all the energy in the soil water that's still left to pump the seeds up and do the blooming and pollinating and set seed. And then when it starts to run out of water, and that depending on the year, that could be very soon. Well, all it does is it just shuts down all the reproductive stuff and says, okay, the Bible says, go forth and procreate. I did that. I'm just not going to make more kids. So, so we're done with that because there's nothing for the roots to feed them. And so then it stops, and so you get a lesser yield. So yields are a function of the moisture in the soil as the plant needs it in that latter part of the year. So sometimes we'll come in and sprinkle, irrigate, give it maybe an inch or so of water, but not much. You know.
Sounds like it would be a good plant for the future with climate change occurring.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Especially if climate change means we're going to get more rain. And recently, so we had this river of water on us, and we had a 3 days, and we ended up with 15 inches of rain here, which is phenomenal.
Oh
I've
my
never seen more
gosh.
than 9 before.
Wow. 15 inches. And was that like a 3 day, 4 day period?
3 day event, yes. The two
Wow.
and a half. Yeah, and so there's erosion and flooding next door where the land is tilled. We don't till ours, so we had almost no erosion at all, and um, all the dirt that was on the field is still on the field.
I mean, that's where you can see the results of your actions, right?
Yeah,
Your
yeah,
farm is more
yeah,
resilient. That's great.
yeah, yeah.
So, Larry, we've talked about wheat. We've talked a bit about what it needs to grow and be happy, and the history of wheat. And I'm just curious if you could share with listeners you talked about Einkorn, but some of your favorite varieties of wheat.
One of my favorites is Ethiopian Blue Tinge Farro, fairly tall thing, escaped from the Fertile Crescent to Ethiopia, was found, someone from Canada brought it over to the United States in the early 90s, and it's been here since. And so we have it, and it's always high in demand. It's kind of purplish colored grain, and it's fairly high in gluten, not super high, but makes a decent bread, wonderful tasting, and if you put it in a risotto type dish, amazing. It's one of the best tasting wheats there are. So That one I dearly love. I also like Einkorn a lot, and I like the Ethiopian Blue Tinge because it's free thrashing, so it's easy to get the seed out. The other one I like is Khorasan, or Khorasan, excuse me, which comes from Khorasan, Iran, 18,000-year-old grain, biggest in the world, great big tall monster thing, um, 6 foot tall or so, and it actually has goosenecks on the stems going up, so the stems don't fold over and restrict the amount of nutrition going to the plant, to the seeds. So Mother Nature's taking care of the babies. And it's a golden big thing, and it swells up like orzo if you're making a risotto type dish. So just pretty darn amazing grain. I really like that one a lot. So and it's free thrashing too, but it's huge.
I know there's so many wheats that people have not, varieties of wheat that people haven't heard of.
Yeah, yes.
And when you say farro, oh, when you say farro, you're just, that's another word for wheat.
That's an Italian word for wheat, but
Hmm.
those are the ones that haven't been crossed. I mean, they're not Triticum aestivum. Okay, so for example, Einkorn is Triticum monococcum. Okay, and it's called Petit Farro, and then Farro medio, which is Emmer Farro, is a Triticum diococcum because one mono it only has 2 sets of chromosomes, and just a di means 2 times that, so it has 4 sets, and it's a tetraploid. And then the last one, Spelt, which is the baby of the Faros, and the youngest, 18,000 years old, from Europe, and used as in baking and pastry and stuff like that. Had lots of extensibility to the way its gluten bands are made. Um, as I said, 18,000 years old and has a husk on it, and it is Triticum aestivum subspecies spelta. So it is an aestivum because all the aestivums, the wheats we know, are hexaploids, so they have 6 sets of chromosomes. They have 42, so they're way smarter than both of us.
It's amazing. Spelt is one of my favorite grains to make bread with.
Yeah, and if you're making pizza, it's a great way. When you make bread with it, you can also
Hmm.
make cakes and cookies and all kinds of stuff with it. But if you want to do any pastry, it's great for pastry. If you're making pizza dough and you want more extensibility, throw a little spelt in it. Now, when you're spinning that stuff on your finger on top, then it'll spread out more.
Ooh, good to know. Well, okay, so what are your favorite ways, and you can just name a couple of ways to prepare wheat?
Yeah, I like the risotto way, but I also put it a lot of times in my longevity stew, which is something that I've made, and you can find the recipe for it on Civil Eats. If you Google farmer longevity stew, you'll see me right where I'm sitting right now.
I'll put a link to that in the interview.
Yeah, and it has 72 ingredients, and they're local and seasonal.
That's a lot of ingredients.
Well, they're not all there at the same time because, as I said, it's local and seasonal. So I'm not going to do tomatoes in December. There's vegetables, there's mushrooms, there's bone broth, and the standards are the mushroom, the cactus leaf with nopalus, which I like a lot because it's kind of mucilaginous and it's really good for your body. And then vegetables and grains, various grains or pseudo grains or beans.
Yum. It sounds good. I could use with longevity.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah.
Well, Larry, we have covered a lot of ground in this interview, and let's move from longevity to wheat. And we're going to be talking about a special kind of wheat that you're growing. And I just wanted to say that I don't know how many listeners are going to try their hand at growing their own wheat after listening to this interview, unless they have like a 55-gallon drum
Yeah, yeah,
and a drill.
yeah, no, it is. Yeah. Or one of those new fat tire electric bicycles, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, that would be good.
Yeah, I know.
So, so wheat is an annual crop, usually, right? It is. And it has to be planted every year. And so you're really excited about a perennial wheat that was developed by the Bread Lab at Washington State University. And is it Salish Blue? Is that the variety that
Yeah,
you're growing?
exactly correct. Yes, it is.
Oh, good. My
Mhm.
research paid off. So, can you tell us a bit about this plant and then tell us why having a perennial wheat would be a huge breakthrough, not only for farmers, but also for the world, right? And climate change.
Let me start with the latter first. So the reason it's a breakthrough is because all weeds
Hmm.
have to be tilled, and whether you're in the Great Plains, Nebraska, wherever you're at, and you're growing weeds, you have to till the ground. When you till the ground and you disturb it, then all of the, not all, but much of the carbon is escaping, going back up to the atmosphere and causing global warming. But if you do not till, or you minimum till like we do, just one little line every 30 inches. So we do about 1/15 of the field, and then we cover it right back very soon. Then you have no aeration of the carbon, and so you're not losing it. So that's one issue. But then if you have a perennial plant where you never have to till, you just plant it and leave it. And so the Land Institute in Kansas has been working on this, not only this, but polyculture as well, where you have more than one crop in a field. So they took wheatgrass, which was called Elatrigia pontica. It's now called Cynopyrum ponticum because those guys that name plants, taxonomists, just need something to do, so they keep changing the names, and it drives me crazy. But anyway, that's what they do. So this is a perennial plant, and the Land Institute came over here about 4 or 5 years ago. They were just starting. They had no idea it was a perennial. They saw my field that had been in for 16 years and were
Wow.
kind of amazed. And I have not tilled mine ever. I can't call mine, they call theirs Kernza. I can't call mine Kernza. I just call it perennial wheatgrass. And it's medium tall wheatgrass because mine is 8 foot tall. The tall one is probably 12 foot tall.
Wow.
Theirs is shorter than that. Okay, and so the root system of the, and Patagonia is working with the Land Institute and with people back in Minnesota trying to grow this and other places, including me here, trying to grow Kernza. They use it to make what's called the long root ale because they have pictures, and you can go Google their information on Instagram or whatever, or the website about Kernza, and it has a 30-foot root system. So they physically dug out the roots with a backhoe, dug out alongside the plant and show the roots all the way down. Whereas an annual wheat has maybe a 2-foot root structure down there pulling nutrients. This thing is pulling from 30 feet. And so not only is it pulling from 30 feet, but it's exchanging because the roots are dripping out of the ends when it gets to what's called glutation, where a plant, when like we rest at night, when a plant rests at night, the roots get a chance to fill up the whole plant with water. And so if it gets too much water, then it drips out from the roots, and you sometimes wake up in the morning and see plants dripping off the leaves. Well, that's because they're fully gutated. So they're filled up with water, ready for the next day of sunshine, blue skies, and trying to go without a drink. But, the roots can't keep up. So that's glutation. So anyway, this plant's pulling from deeper. So when it does that, it's sharing with other organisms and bacteria and fungal stuff that's underneath there, and even other plant roots that may be there. They're exchanging things and making deals, and so they're improving the soil and making it more like a forest floor. So if you have a forest floor, you don't need anything because everything that's falling off the trees is being composted and digested and recirculated, and it's very circular, that system. If you think about that, as a small microcosm of the entire United States world, our world situation. So then now you have the best of everything because it's just recirculating. So you don't even need legumes. So you asked about the wheat's cool season. It's a heavy feeder. It has a fibrous root system, as all grasses do, not a taproot. And then we plant legumes alternate seasons, and those have taproots with rhizobium nodules on them, which take nitrogen out of the air, which is 78%, and put it in the nodules. And then the next year, as those nodules decompose, they release the nitrogen to the plants that are growing it. So we call the legumes feeders, and the grasses the eaters. So wheat is an eater, and beans and peas and lentils and that sort of stuff are feeders. So it's a good transition to have both of them, and then we also have the animals, which the back end of them becomes a feeder too. So
You've incorporated animals onto your farm as well since I last saw you, I think.
yes, yes, we have sheep, and I don't have very many yet, but I'd like to have a couple hundred. But we're getting there. So and they're amazing. So what they can do, and they eat things down, and we come back and let the crops grow, and then now we've got the fertilizer on top, and we don't till, so it just kind of oozes in there. But as we do that, we end up with more microbial bacteria and kinds of activity down there, and everything gets decomposed, and so we get the benefit of the animals. So what goes in the front that comes out the back is a benefit to the next crop. So yeah. And so then what happened with his wheat, they took this Alatrigia or Thinopyrum, which is a wheatgrass with this long root system, and they used it as the male, and then they took the pollen parts off of it and took a regular Triticum aestivum, and I don't know which one they used, but some wheat, and you'd have to check with Dr. Stephen Jones to find out which one. It doesn't matter. And they named it after the Salish tribe of Native Americans that are in eastern Washington, I do believe. And so they made the cross, took the male parts off of the wheat, put the male parts of the wheatgrass onto it, and fertilized it. Okay, so when you do that, the fertilization takes place, but then it takes a while for the plant to realize, this was a monkey and not an elephant, and I'm an elephant, so I should abort this. So then it starts to abort it. And so what's happened is they've gotten really smart, and so they do this thing called embryonic rescue. So they'll take the embryo that's developed on the wheat plant that's been pollinated by the wheat grass plant and put it in a test tube and feed it all the nutrients it needs to grow. It continues to grow, and if it ends up developing a seed, the seed matures, now you've got a new variety. And all you need is one seed. And that one seed will get you 16 seeds. Those 16 will get you 256, and away you go. That makes sense?
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. That's so interesting. And so, one thing that I know that people always get confused is genetically modified versus hybridization. And those are
hmm
two different things.
Yeah. Genetically modified means, say you're in Canada and you want your Nicotiana or Salpiglossus or something like that that's growing in the freeway median to light up at night. So then you cross it with a firefly gene.
Hmm.
So it's way two different things, and that does exist, by the way. Yeah,
Really? Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah,
God.
yeah. Only in Canada.
So I envision your Salish blue is growing in your field, surrounded by all these
Yeah,
ancient crops and grains. Is it doing okay?
yeah, it is. Doing great. Yeah, it's about 6 inches tall and doing fine. Yes.
Wow, that's great. So the ancient grains are being nice to it?
Yeah, well, the ancient grains are not in the exact same field because I wanted to keep that one as a perennial because the ancient grains are annuals.
Hmm.
So this one is going to stay and it's going to be itself, but it does have clovers and other weeds and things in there growing with it, and that's fine. They're all communicating.
Hmm.
But the issue is this is a new system, and so they haven't gotten it figured out exactly right yet. What happens is Salish blue is a perennial wheat, but it doesn't kill itself, like wheat does. Wheat pumps out ethylene into the system and says, "Okay, you're dying and you're done." So, but Alatrigia or Thinopyrum, it does the same thing, but it only does it to the above ground stuff. And the roots and the clump that's going to grow again is still alive. Well, this plant doesn't know that because it it is thinking that it's a perennial. So as soon as it sets seed and you cut it, it tries to make seed again. And when it does that, that's too much load on the roots, and then pretty soon the plant collapses. So they think that this perennial may only last a couple years. I'll let you know in a couple years.
Hmm.
And so that's what we have. So, but, it's a good start, and I'm sure it's going to evolve. And there's brilliant minds out there that are going to make it work. And so that's the story of perennial wheats. I don't know we're going to see those out in the grain fields because typically people do, wheat one year and like corn and soybeans. So they'll do wheat and soybeans if you're in that part of Nebraska or wherever it is. They do soybeans, so they'll keep changing the crops. And I have a friend who has a farm in Nebraska and he fertilizes his soybeans. I couldn't understand why, but he's monocrop, so he's growing on dirt, not soil. And the definition, the difference is dirt is inert and it's dead. So there's no microbial activity. So the rhizobium on the soybean plant can't work because there's no bacterial or microbial action underneath there to make it work. So he has to inject anhydrous ammonia as he's planting soybeans to grow them. But typically, if you were doing soybeans followed by corn and you had it in soil, not dirt, the soybeans would feed the corn the next year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does totally. I
Yeah.
know it's interesting, and I really do think you talking about the difference between dirt and soil is so important
Yeah.
because people don't know. Soil is can be a living, vibrant, healthy
Well,
ecosystem.
it was
Yeah.
before we got in touch with it in the 1940s. We created the Decibel, and all that stuff. So as soon as we put the plows in the prairies, we screwed up.
And that's why the perennial wheat could really be a breakthrough, right? Because no more tilling or very minimal tilling, I would think, just at the beginning, and probably less labor, um, less herbicide, hopefully,
Yeah.
and if it's 30-foot root systems, right?
Yeah.
That's so much carbon sequestration happening.
Yes. Yeah. All those are the positives. Yeah. Yeah.
Larry, do you think that perennial wheat will replace annual wheat in the future?
I think it depends upon the yield of this one because some wheats right now, Jill, are yielding upwards of 17,000 pounds of seed an acre. That's an awful lot. This one, I don't know. I'll stay tuned. I'll let you know what it does, but I doubt it's going to do that. But maybe the next year it would, but maybe the year after that it's going to start going downhill because of this perennial issue I told you about. So I don't know. I think the jury's still out. I don't know.
It'll be really interesting to find out. And so, Larry, the seeds of the blue salish, are they true to type or are they viable?
Yes, they are. Yeah. So we have a new variety created now in that test tube, and then yes, they're true to type, and they look like two different seeds. It looks like a mixture because one seed looks like a farro and the other seed looks like a rye or almost like the elatrigia, or excuse me, the thinopyrum, the wheatgrass. The one is a little narrower, the other one's a little fatter. And so, my goal is to grow this, take it to the market in Santa Monica, let some of my wonderful baking friends bake with it and see what they think. Because not only are we going to have it, and they could get it from Washington State if they wanted right now to bake with it, but in Washington they're growing it east of the Cascades, I do believe. And so if you do that, it's a lot different terroir than right here. And even Dr. Stephen Jones says the best terroir for any grain is cool and moist, where Los Osos is cool and moist. So that's why our grains are somewhat better than most of those that are grown in the San Joaquin Valley or even the Tehachapi Range or down in Los Angeles where they used to grow grains. Ours are better because we're cooler typically and
Mm-hmm.
moisture.
Yeah, when I've ground up I'm trying to remember the one that was I know I love the Ethiopian Blue Tinge, and then there was one other one of yours that I ground up for flour. It was the best bread ever. So fresh. Really tasty. Oh my gosh. And what a difference. What a difference too between like the white bread, like that whole white bread phenomenon that happened. What I don't know how many years ago where people
Yeah.
people used to bake bread at home from whole grains, and then it just shifted into white bread, people buying white bread. And really I think I'm still trying to master whole grain bread baking, but it really is much better for us.
Yeah, and I think the third world countries and some of the European countries as well have it mastered. Whereas what happened is, remember I told you about the Haber-Bush process in the 1940s, and that's when the switch was made to white bread. And matter of fact, we have one we're growing this year, thanks to a friend of mine from LA. It's called Amarillo, and or Amarillo if you're in Texas, but it's actually Amarillo if you speak Spanish. And it's a yellow wheat that has the yellow carotenoids in it, and so we're trying to get that one to grow, because what they did post World War II with the Haber-Bush process and the Chinese wheat process and all that, they ended up getting rid of the yellow so they could make white bread.
Oh, gosh.
So that's where the white bread came from, was that process, and yeah, there was a development that was funded by Rockefeller Group in Texas, where they did some breeding of wheats, and it was pretty phenomenal what he did, and he increased the yield like 4x. And I want to say probably that's about when Yacoro Rojo came out, which was from Mexico. And I don't know what Yacoro means, but Rojo means red, so it was obviously a hard red wheat. And that was very popular in the 1970s when I started farming in the San Joaquin Valley, when I first started farming, period. So, yeah, anyway, that 4x increase is, meant a lot to farmers. And you look at, capitalism, and that looks a lot better than growing something that, if it would yield 8,000 pounds versus 4,000, 2,000, then you're better.
Yeah. And I think that's something really to be mindful of, is that farmers, it's a hard job. You're a farmer, you can attest to that, I'm sure. And that really, if you have a giant, giant farm, I could see how you would go for the more convenient, more easily harvestable, more easily harvested
Yeah,
crop.
yeah, yeah. No, that's true. And so you go for the ease, and you go for the brand name, and you've got all these seed companies coming at you saying, look, my corn grows, yields more than this other one, and so it's a race out there, and so there's a lot of advertising and money thrown after it. And then you go to the farm place and buy your seed, and you get the seed that's in vogue that year, and away you go, and you plant that one and go. And so they're at the mercy of the plant breeders. And then the plant breeders, if they're affiliated with Monsanto, good luck. So, I know farmers in San Joaquin Valley, I don't even call them farmers anymore, because they just plant and irrigate and then spray with Roundup. You don't have to farm.
Yeah, that's a very yeah, it's sad,
Careful.
and that's why small
Yeah.
farms actually, I can see the important role that small farms will play in food security.
Yes, we definitely need those, because those other ones with the great big John Deere tractors with the no driver on them, and they're, except on the end maybe to make the turns, but they'll probably get that figured out too. But the GPS driven tractors, and when they do a 30-inch row, it's 30 inches plus or minus a centimeter or something, and that's the way it works. So, and then that's getting fancier all the time, but that's corporate farming at its best, and I don't want anything to do with that. It's not really agriculture; that's agribusiness. They took the culture out of agriculture and they turned it into business. So if you think of agribusiness, just think of it as agriculture without culture.
Mm. Yes, it's true. And Larry, you actually can attest to this too, because you're a successful farmer. You've been farming, I learned, was it 50 years?
Yeah,
I thought it was
yeah,
25. And I believe you started out growing conventionally and then
I did.
switched to ecological farming. And what made you prompted you to make that switch?
Well, when I sold my property in the San Joaquin Valley and came over here to the Central Coast, which I'm not leaving, there's an adage they say you can take the boy out of the valley, but you can't take the valley out of the boy, and that is true. The valley being the San Joaquin Valley, that pot tam soup bowl right now, and eat bowl later. Um, I'm not going back, but yeah, I started there, and then when I came over here, I tried to grow organically, and I just didn't have enough mental horsepower to make it work. And it
Hmm.
takes a while to scrutinize and learn. Mother Nature can deal you some really amazing lessons, and when you learn a lesson that costs you money, at least for me, I don't forget it. I've got a pretty good memory. So now I know how to farm. People come to my farm and they go, geez, I know you're farming organically, but what's with all those weeds? And I go, well, I don't see any weeds. Well, all those. I go, no, those are called companion plants. So just change the terminology. So, some companion plants are better than others. Because if you got a tall companion plant and you got a short crop you're growing, you're in deep stuff. So you just have to. There's a lot to know, and once you know it, and I'm more than willing to pass it on and teach people. And I wish we get over this damn virus so we can get people on the farm and actually show them. Because right now all we can do is videos on Instagram and stuff like that.
Exactly. And your plants, after being on your farm, your plants are so healthy and vital and just alive looking. And what would you
Yeah.
say in our closing? Like, what would you say is a secret to one of the secrets of really growing, having a diverse, healthy farm?
Well, the secret is to grow the soil first and then grow the plants in the soil, and that way you get um, high nutrition in the plants because they're coming from soil that has the capability of delivering. But if we just simply and there's four things you have to watch to grow soil. So you need a carbon nitrogen balance, and then you need a bacteria fungal balance. So if you get all those four things balanced, and there's tests now that are very expensive that can tell you where you're at. If you get those balanced, now you're emulating the forest floor. If we can emulate a forest floor, we're done. Just get out of the way and plant. Get the hell out of it. And green side up and just get away. Because people say, well, what do you do? I don't. What do you grow? I say, I don't grow anything but weary. I just kind of get out of the way and let Mother Nature.
Oh, you're in a partnership.
Yeah, it really is.
Have you found that the interest in the way that you farm has grown over the
It
years?
has, yes, immensely. And I'm looking. What we do is called regenerative organic farming because it's way over and above. So we try to have a circular cycle so that there's no inputs. All the inputs come from the soil, through the animals, through the bacteria, through the fungus, all that. But the green manure crops that we grow. Um, so if we need more carbon, we just grow grass, take it further down maturity. And if we need nitrogen, we grow a legume, like fava beans or favita beans or something like that. And so those are easy and minimal tillage. Yeah, there's a responsibility to make sure that you're growing the soil, and that's how you do it. But the interest is getting more and more. I'm trying to see when I look on LinkedIn and Facebook and some of those things, and I see people in Martha's Vineyard, they're doing a regenerative organic farm, and yes, it's 8 acres, and I'm going, yeah. So how are you going to convince the rest of agriculture to follow you? 8 acres, what the hell are you going to do with 8 acres? We've got 8 billion acres, so you got to be able to scale this. And so there's somebody in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and he has, I want to say, 18 or 19,000 acres. It's regenerative organic farming. And so, it's people like that we want to be following. See, how did he scale that? And I haven't followed him too much. No, he may be doing more ranching, with animals than farming, growing plants. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I'm not sure what he's doing, but the ranching part is easy to do regeneratively. The farming part entails ranching plus, row cropping and all that.
Yeah, it seems more time consuming and you have to slow down. Well, we just have to do we have to do a billion 8-acre farms.
Yes, no, we do that. Yeah, we need to do that, but that starts with the mindset, and if we do that and we save carbon, like our field of Elatrigia pontica, that's now called Thinopyrum ponticum, has been on this farm for 21 years. We
Wow.
did soil sampling with his fancy methods, and our carbon, nitrogen, and bacterial fungal ratios are great. It's some of the best soil in the United States. It will take 20 plus inches of rain an hour,
Hmm.
which is phenomenal because my next door neighbors will take about half an inch an hour. So we've got good soil, but that's due to those roots penetrating that soil to that depth and making it accepting of the water that's coming in. So now we don't have runoff. Now we have a water bank right on the farm. instead of watching it rain and go out to the ocean through the creeks, and we just have to sit here. My next door neighbors, you could jet ski. There was water going over the 4-foot fence on the other end because it was all tilled. Um, and you just wait until the creek drains it out to the ocean. Well, that's lovely, isn't it? Ours, we didn't hardly lose any water. It just stayed on the farm.
Wow. So really the perennials then are that
Yeah,
valuable partner in conserving water and the carbon sequestration because we're not tilling and they're not changing so much.
yeah, and just go back to what I said earlier. When we put the plow in the prairie, we screwed up. Prairies were all perennial, and they were kaleidoscopic. One thing bloomed earlier. The C3s bloomed early in the year, and the C4s bloom later in the year. The ones that use a different cycle. So there's some that go dormant in summer. Those are C3s. The ones that are active in summer are C4s, and then they go dormant in winter. So that's how prairie worked, and it was an ecosystem that fed each other. There were composite crops there. There was stuff in Fabaceae that put the nitrogen back in the ground. It was a self-feeding thing, and so that's what the people at the Land Institute are trying to get back to. As a matter of fact, their Kernza, they're growing it with alfalfa in the center. Their alfalfa, they're thinking, is putting the nitrogen in the ground in between the rows, and then they don't, to harvest it. One is taller than the other one, and the seeds are way different sizes. And so they're looking for, well, how do we do polyculture like that? So we're doing a little bit of that. I'm following in the footsteps of Wes Jackson, who is an older man now, maybe he's younger than me. I don't know, because I'm pretty damn old. But anyway, we have one field that I call the 4F field. So we have favas and favitas and flax and farro all in the same field. And the first two are legumes, and the last two, one is a grass, the farro, and then the other one is a forb, but needs nitrogen as well. So, and they're all different seed sizes. So I can grow them all, cut them all the same day, and I have to pick the day so that we're getting maximum ripeness on everything, because otherwise some will start to shatter and stuff like that. And then I harvest them and thrash them and take them into the mill and screen out the different sizes. They're all different sizes. And so with stuff like that, I'm trying to emulate a prairie, but still that's annual right now. But if you could do it as a perennial like Wes Jackson is doing with the Land Institute, then that's the best of all worlds. And they're working diligently on lots of stuff. You can Google them, or you should probably include them in this podcast so people can see what they're doing, because they're doing phenomenal stuff. They have research assistants from all over the world.
Oh, I know. I've read about them, and I will put a link in to
Yeah,
the show
I think
notes for them.
yeah.
And then if
Yeah.
people want to find you online, it's KandarianOrganicFarms.com. And I'll put a link in the show notes for that as well. And so the only other thing I just wanted to share, and then we'll go, but I was looking in this old gardening book I have, and they were saying that, and you probably know this, but I had never heard it, how in the past when people were making cuttings of plants for propagation, that they used to use a
Mhm.
grain of wheat.
Mhm.
Did you know that? Where they would split the stem of the plant and insert a grain of wheat and then put it in a soil mixture. And then they said that as the plant, as the wheat got moist, it would emit some hormone like chemicals and that would help the plant grow. But then when rooting hormone came on the scene, they just replaced that with the rooting hormone. Have you heard anything like that?
I'm not, but that makes total sense because there's auxins and cytokinins and all kinds of stuff that we've engineered. But the plant does that automatically because when a seed starts to grow, the seed dies and transforms itself into a plant. And so when you're making bread and you're soaking the wheat and you're going through that process, and it's a alchemical process, it's alchemy at its best. I mean, you should be making jewelry out of the gold you
Mm-hmm.
save. But uh, the starches are becoming sugars, and then the plant is giving off different compounds, so it tells itself to go ahead and germinate. And I'm thinking that those things that it's giving off in that little crevice is going to be enough to make the other plant take off.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I'm going to try it. I'll let you know.
Yeah, no, I think that's extremely interesting. But that's the way we started doing stuff, and then probably some chemical person guru decided to figure out what that chemical was, and they just made it. And then, but that's totally different because, again, when you make something and you think you know all about it, you don't. So, and then you only make one component of it, and it doesn't work like you thought it was going to. So,
And then we know what happens with all the unintended consequences of our actions.
yeah, between plastics in the ocean and aspartame and on and on and on, it doesn't end. So, get the ego out and just get your hoe out and start hoeing the line and plant something, and then get out of
Yes.
there.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Okay, such a pleasure. Okay, bye bye.
Thanks for listening to The Plant Report. The Plant Report is produced by Jill Cloutier and is a project of Sustainable World Radio. For more podcasts about plants, permaculture, and ecology, visit our website, sustainableworldradio.com, and you can also find us on iTunes, Facebook, and Twitter. The Plant Report is created for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any health condition. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to thank the plants for everything they do.